then today we will actually be doing this particular basket weave right here. So, which is based on the bow tie shape, which is pretty awesome. And it comes in a large, and it also comes in a mini for a small background space. Now, with this ruler, if you utilize this ruler, what we do is, this is the drawing portion that you would mark your section, whether it be your paper or your actual quilt. And then what you would do is use our mini curve, and I prefer the double curve as opposed to the mini curve 1. So this would be the mini curve 2, Mr. Curve 2 mini. And so this curve is going to match exactly the marking of this particular tool. So now let me put this stuff aside and let's get started on how we would work this. Also, we'll have in a future episode something that's going to explain how you can actually go inside the weave and create some really cool designs on the inside of the weave. Okay, put that aside. And let me organize myself here. You know, the last few days doing this whole live thing, I have a whole lot more respect for Lawrence Welk. I can't imagine how they would do it live. All right, so now we are in the space of our quilt, and we're going to be using paper to do the drawing, just to kind of get you familiar with how this works. And what we're going to do is, if this were a quilt, I would locate the center vertical line, and that's going to be my home line that I'm going to work from to draw this out. And now we're going to organize our camera a little bit here, Mr. Ritchie. I'm going to take us in a little bit closer, a little bit closer. That looks good. Okay, so now you can see that I've already marked. I've used a straight ruler and I've marked with what would be your chalk on your quilt. I used a pencil on the paper, the center line, so that I can keep everything lined up. So now what I would do is this. If this were the bottom of my throat space, right near my belly bar down here, then what I would do is I would start marking at the top of my quilt. So I would bring my ruler, I would line it up, and you'll notice with this particular ruler, what we have, if you can see, is it's got crosshairs in here. And so that is going to line up, and I'm going to keep that right on the line. Now, the one thing to remember is I see a double line as I'm looking at this. That means this ruler is upside down. So I need to turn it the other way, so that way I know that the etching is against the fabric, or in this case, the paper. So I'm going to keep that line right there. I'm going to line this up. And if I were marking on a quilt, if it were on color fabric, I would be using my Bowen, and I would actually be using the thin tip pencil with the Bowen in white. And then if I were actually marking on white fabric, I would be using my blue water-soluble Mark Speak On. And those are the products that I prefer. And then if I were going to be removing this on the fabric, I would be using my Blue Line Erase. Okay, so now I'm going to line that up. And because we're on paper, I'm actually going to be using a marker. Line that up straight as I can. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do my outline. And my angle for the filming is a little odd, so you'll get the point as we go. I would do that with my chalk, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab my pencil, which would be my chalk as well. And I would go ahead and I would put registration marks right on the crosshairs, and you'll see why we're going to add those in just a second. And now I'm going to turn this the opposite way. So now I'm going to take this vertical where it was horizontal. and I'm going to line that up perfectly even right on this line, and I would repeat the same process. I butt right up against there, keep my line straight. And by the way, make sure, and I've done this a few times on quilts using this tool, make sure that you're not just looking here with that straight line. You want to make sure back here that that's lined up, because if I do this, it looks lined up here, but back here it's a little bit off. So we want to make sure that it's lined up perfect from front to back. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this shape right there. Come down, and again, I am pre-marking everything as I go. And if I'm on my machine, I would be pre-marking right on the frame. Turn that the opposite way, and I would continue alternating this all the way down to the bottom of my throat space. And that's the wonderful part about these particular tools. And I'm just going to go ahead and use this rather than grabbing my pencil. This is a sample. I will probably just go ahead and toss at the end, come down. Now when we finish this, we're actually going to go over to the machine and we're going to quilt this out. I'm going to show you how this quilts out. And I'm going to come down and do this. I know we jumped right into the designs. We're going to save our questions for afterwards. So if you do have any questions, you can just give me a holler after we finish, and we'll leave a little bit of a section for question and answers. Okay, now I'm going to continue all the way down. Boom, slide. And I want to make sure to keep your marking tool up against the actual template or the ruler. That way you're not going to be getting any distortion. Okay, and again, out here, especially on these sides, I'm going to go ahead and give myself those little ticks, because once we finish this row, as we work our way down, then we're going to head up this way. So now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to, and that's why I have these lines here, I'm going to line that up there, make sure that that's lined up. And now I'm going to go ahead and head my way up and do my next row. And it doesn't matter, you could go to the right or you could go to the left, whichever is the most comfortable for you. And I want to make sure to put my little tick here, little tick here, little tick there. Slide this up, line that up. Everything fits perfectly. So I'm going to line this up. And what you're creating is this wonderful three-dimensional weave. Now I love using this, like I said, in open spaces, but it gives me a lot of opportunity to go into these spaces and actually put secondary designs, which of course most of you know, if I see fabric, it's not quilted enough. So I'm going to line that up, go back, and I forgot my tick mark, but again, remember, quilting is not about perfection. Line that. Again, I'm going to go ahead, and don't forget my little tips over here. Now, even if I did forget to put this little guy in, when I actually go to quilt it with my ruler, it's still going to go and it's going to be fine. So you don't, if you miss these little spots, you don't have to stop and go back. You'll get used to how you use these. And I find that I'm using these more and more on quilts. It just gives a really nice feel. I think we're going through a phase, as much as I love my feathers and feathers in general and leaves and that sort of stuff, we're going through a time when we're doing different things design-wise. Our eye is being attracted to different shapes, more 3D type effects, more straight lines. I think we're taking a little break from feathers. Kind of like when you read, and if you read a lot of specific genre, sometimes you have to take a break to fall back in love with it when you come back. So I'm going to turn that again, and I'm going to come straight up, line that up. Now as you're marking this, it goes pretty fast, as you're going to see here. If I wasn't explaining it, it would be going much quicker. Okay, so now I'm going to pop over to this side. Okay, and the same thing, I'm going to start low and I'm going to come high. I can just keep in a little bit more control if I work from low to high. But my first row should always start at the top of my throat space and come down in the center so that everything is balanced right to left, and also the edge of the quilt will look a lot better. Come down, again, put my little registration marks there, put one out here, one down here, and again, I have a little partial here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip that little guy and make sure I'm in screen so that you can see. If I go out of screen, sorry about that. There we go, and now I'm going to slide up, place those, and again, this tick goes here, this tick goes here, and I'm just alternating all the way up until we finish. And I would be completely drawing this whole space. Now, let me do just a few more here. Up, around. Again, keep your marking tool against the edge of that ruler. You don't want to go like this and start twisting. Let me go here. I don't want to go up and go this way so that way I'm going to be even just 1/8 of an inch away from the ruler. I want to keep it as close to that ruler as I can, because remember, these match to this ruler when it's quilted. And if you accidentally put an extra 1/8 of an inch on the outside, then this won't line up the way that it needs to line up. So those are just a few tips that I found when I was exploring with this particular ruler, and we were trying to formulate how it would work the best. Okay, I'm going to come up. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second. Let's finish that. And so I would work my way from the center out, however big that design would be, whether I was using the big guy or the little guy. Now with this little guy, that's going to be using the same curve. So these both are married to the Mr. Curve 2 Mini. And the reason that I suggest utilizing this with the Mr. Curve 2 rather than the Mr. Curve 1 is the Mr. Curve 1 actually has a flat bottom. And so if I were working with that, then it's going to be hard to have to turn the ruler and put it behind the foot. Whereas with my Mr. Curve 2, you can actually go ahead and quilt this curve, and then when I come over here, I could come sideways, and then when I come here, so the ruler will always remain in the front of your hopping foot. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody, and it will when we get over to the machine. So let's look at this space here. Again, there's a lot of different things that we can actually do to fill up this space, because once we quilt it, and I do like to go in and fill these little squares just to give it a little bit more of a 3D effect. You don't have to. You know, I know everybody has a different level of density in their quilting, but one of the things that I like to do is to use like a small curve, and what I'll tend to do is once I get everything, my base quilted, and by the way, when I'm quilting this, what I'm actually going to be doing as I'm quilting, let's pretend this is my quilting ruler, is I'm not just going one line over and over, because there are a few lines you're going to have to retravel. I like doing my 1, 2, 3. If you've been following any of my work for a while, you know that there are some times in some of my designs that I retravel a line, especially if I'm doing ditch work. And for me, this is going to be exactly the same as curved ditch work. So when I would be quilting this, I would be going 1, 2, 3, stop, and then 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3. So that's how I would be quilting this as I go, and then following it back up. So now if I wanted to add to this, I would have my ruler, and I would be refollowing, once this is all done, those lines. And I want to share a little secret with you. When you get seasoned as a quilter, you actually, once you finish quilting the base of this, when you want to go in and add your other stuff, you're going to find that you can stay pretty close to almost exactly on that line without even using a ruler to go back in to do different areas. But that's something that comes with time. So sometimes what I like to do with this, once it's all quilted, is I will take my small curve, and the first few times you do it, like I can look across and see my ticks here, and I know right where they're at. But when you're new, you may choose to use some chalk, make a line across on all of those, make a line across on all of those, right where the ticks are. And then I'm going to go in a 1/4 inch. You could go in a 1/2 of an inch. You could go in a 1/4 inch. You can do however much you want. And I would be using my small Mista curve or small curve of whose ever brand you have of curves for this part. And of course, I would be traveling 1, 2, 3, travel the ditch, flip the ruler. I would use the Mista Curve 2 rather than the Mista Curve 1 and repeat that same process so that now what you're doing is you're taking that basket weave and you're actually adding a whole new element to it. Now that's just one of, I have about 40 or 50 different elements now that I'm doing in here. And because we have that center line, this part's quilted. I don't pre-mark that. I just go ahead and quilt that as I go. But once I have this and I pull off to the next side, then my next part would be maybe I would go up here and I would chalk from the center out. I always want to work from the center line out and create 1/4 inch. And I'll just put a little chalk line there, and then I'll go to 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. And then same thing. From the middle out and down, same thing. I would go 1/4 inch because that's going to give me a 1/2 inch in the dead center. And then I would go to another 1/2 of an inch, slide another 1/2 of an inch, slide another 1/2 of an inch. And so now I have this wonderful effect of the basket weave actually weaving in and out. So what we'd actually have is something such as here, if you can see that. And again, there are a ton of different things that we can do to play with this. I can actually go in and put an X. And those of you, again, that have taken my feather classes, I might put 2 lotus feathers in here. I could use my small arc or the narrow arc and do some arc designs in here. There's just, again, the sky's the limit on this stuff. These are just bases that you may choose to just use in a basic way like you see here to get this beautiful weave, or you can actually take it and you can actually add some more elements to jack up the level to make it a little more high-end custom. And again, I do like to go into these little square sections, and I like to do some microfill in there. It doesn't take that long. All right, so now what I've done actually is I have marked out from here over. And Rich, can you zoom in there so that they can kind of see those marks okay? And it looks like you can see them pretty well. You can see that it's a little bit lighter because I'm using this really thin tip right here. But you can see that I've pre-marked everything out and doing this whole side. On a queen size quilt, I would say doing the throat space would probably take me about 5 to 10 minutes to get it marked. So it doesn't take that long. Now we're going to go back to right here and I'm going to head up. I've got my little halfways marked. And so I'm going to come right here and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to repeat just like we did on the paper. And I'm going up against the ruler to mark that out, down, under. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it sideways. Whoops, I forgot. Make sure to get my little ticks so that way I have a little bit of a guideline so I can place it, get it lined up, and move fairly quickly. You'll start to build a muscle memory on that. It took me about half of a row the first time I did the quilt to build that muscle memory of make sure to put the little tick lines in so that way when you turn it, you can get it lined up exactly, just like anything else. Okay, up. And remember, I don't want to push too hard with my ruler down. I don't want to stretch things out so that the ruler is off. I'll line that up. And then, whoops, again, tick mark, tick, tick, turn, slide. And then I'm going to line that up and come right up here. And again, what you're going to get, and I'm using the big one right now just so we can see better. Especially I would use this in nice big spaces, but we do have the little mini, which looks awesome in the background of blocks. Okay, so now I'm going to turn that again, line it up, and those both use the same mini curve, so we don't have to buy a ton of tools. And these tools we have got down really low, so they are very inexpensive, which is wonderful as far as I'm concerned. And they are called Mystical Dimensions. This is the number one, Mystical Dimensional, number one, and it is on the website. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and let's just say that I have marked the whole thing. I would come up to my top left of my quilt here, and I would actually go ahead and start quilting. I'm sorry, Mr. Ritchie, could you grab me my snips? I left my snips over on the table. It's different than filming the other tutorials. We don't get to edit all of my goofs out. I know it. I can't be mean to you now. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to lower my needle. Lock my stitches. And I'm going to double check. I am at 12 stitches per inch. That's what I like to work at when I'm doing this type of work. I'm going to line that ruler up right there. And again, I have a little bit of the handy grip on the back, so it's not going to slide. 1, 2, 3, come down. Now I'm going to turn the ruler, line it up. And again, perfection is overrated. I'm going to go 1, 2, and I'm going to take my time as I'm quilting. 3, come up, stop, turn my ruler. Now I could do one of two things. I can go on this side or I can go on this side, whichever is more comfortable for you, whether you're right or left-handed. Now I am right-handed, which means my ruler will always be held in my left hand. I shouldn't say always, but a lot of the time it's going to be held right in my left hand, and that little handle there is going to keep me out of harm's way. I'm going to come down, I'm going to thicken that line just a little bit with my 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take it, I'm going to turn, and again, if I'm a little off, I'm not going to like go crazy. You know, I'm not a computer. And I will say we do actually have these computerized on the, which site, Rich? Urban Elements is starting to get some of these computerized for us. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn that. Yeah, they are pretty amazing. Patricia Ritter is the tops in my opinion. I just love her. The way that she takes designs and adds her own flair and makes them even a little bit better than what I show her. Come down, and then again, so now I'm going to continue down. So I'm going to go in just a little bit. I'm going to follow this just like you would any ditch work. And now I'm going to come in and flip it this way, or remember, I can either turn my ruler here, or so that you can see, I can turn it this way. Now the thing is, I'm going to keep my pinky for the camera out of the way. Normally, if you weren't here and we weren't filming, I would be doing this. This would be the more comfortable way for me to quilt this out. Okay, so now I would go ahead and I would turn it this way, and then we would just continue, and I would go row by row to completely quilt out this whole guy all the way over from left to right.